And we are live with today's pre-show of our N10-008 Network Plus study group. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. We've got a few minutes before we get started, about 9 minutes before we get started. There we go. 9 minutes. I'm doing my last minute checks. We are recording. Stream is up. You can make this so I can actually see the stream. That would be good. That looks good. We've got audio is in the right place. Video is good. So we are now ready to start a live stream in just a few minutes. So if you are here for Network Plus Q&A, this first hour, I will be asking you questions from the exam objectives. And then in the second hour, I just open up the chat room for whatever questions you'd like to ask me. So we'll see how this goes. I'm busy making sure all of this is working the way it should be. I think that's really good. All right. We have a lot to go through today. All brand new Network Plus questions, of course. You can right now, I guess I should put up, can I show this on, I guess I can show it here. Well, that doesn't look so great. There we go. I guess I zoomed up on it. So we should be able to do something like this. There we go. So you can put in where you happen to be. So there's the details. We have you could join the Vevox.app. Go to that web page, and there's an ID on the screen for you. There is a QR code that you can also select from. We'll put the QR code up for a moment for those of you who, although should we still be doing QR codes? Really, it just seems like a horrible security risk. Even, you know where it's coming from if I'm putting a QR code up, but most of the time we don't. We don't know where this came from. Just see it as a real security issue where they can just lead you wherever you happen to be. It does come in handy, though, for other things that I do, so I still keep them there. But just one of those, you really have to check the URL you're going to and make sure everything is legitimate. Let's see what else we got going on. I should be able to start that. That looks good. I think we're okay. I think we are all right. The studio is very busy these days. There's a lot of content being created right now that you're not going to see for months, but that's sort of the way this works, is we sort of step through all of the different things. Vevox has been okay. Vevox has been working all right. There are idiosyncrasies, as with everything, really. But it does solve a problem that we had with our previous vendor, which is it didn't work. So whenever you get to a point with a product that simply does not work, it's time to find a product that, works. So that's the reason for the changes there. So head over to Vevox.com, or more importantly, you can just go to ProfessorMaster.com/QA. So that's good. That works. All right. So now we need to make sure that I can see presentation. Audio is set up properly with nothing else there. I need to put on Do Not Disturb. That would be nice. There we go. Do Not Disturb is now on. And I think that's kind of it. I think we're sort of ready. So we'll have to see. There are lots of things out there that have a good Q&A for online. So when we move things around, we change things around, we shifted it a bit to try to find something more integrated, and this works pretty well. But there's lots of options out there. This one's just fine. The problem with Socrative was that it stopped working. And it stopped working live on a live stream, which was great. If you're doing a live stream, that's what you want. It was just broken. And of course, I opened a ticket, and they sent me a note back. I opened a ticket. Let's see, we did a live stream, I think on a Tuesday or a Thursday. I think it was an A+ study group, and I think it was the second one. So it must have been a Thursday. I think Friday, it still had the problem. I emailed and opened a ticket, and they said, "Oh yeah, it's totally having a problem, but we'll get it fixed." Like, okay. Well, in the meantime, I'm going to go find something that works. So it just so happened that it was on a month before my annual renewal, which never happens, by the way. And this time it did. So I ended up not renewing and going with, I don't know, anybody else at that point. I'm sure they fixed the problem by now, but I had a live stream coming up. It was the weekend. I needed to prep, and I didn't want to go into this whole thing again and deal with where the problems really were. Get rid of the issue. So going to someone else worked out just fine. So that's just the way it goes. Just the way it works out. Oh, let's see. We got a super chat. I really need to, now that we've got the Vevox here, the super chats are sort of stuck off to the side. So I apologize. But Blue Spartan says $5 super chat. Hey, Prof, wanted to say thank you. And a few other people just got my A+, cert. Congratulations on your A+. Fantastic. A lot of people getting their A+ this week. I get a lot that come up to have this. There it is, the Vevox app. There's the ID you were looking for, which is 101-124-435. That number again, 101-124-435. Operators are standing by. This clock on my desk, this one here, I'm assuming, or this one here. There's a couple. This one is an app on my iPad called Nightstand. Nightstand is the app. And there we go. And that's so I can just keep my eye on what I'm supposed to be doing. It doesn't help, by the way, for those wondering. It doesn't help at all. Just there's lots of apps out there that put big clocks on an iPad. So find the one that works for you and rock and roll. This one works for me. So we'll make it happen. We got about 2.5 minutes before we get started. This, for those of you wondering, this is not the show. There's more. There's actual content coming. So bear with me, please. Tangelo says, with a $5 super chat, thanks for helping me pass my Network Plus on the first event. Your free videos are a blessing. Well, it's very nice of you to say. Thanks for that. And congratulations for your new Network Plus certification. What the heck mouse is that? That is a big mouse. That's a monster-sized mouse. Can we put it up? How about we do this? How about we do this right here? That's a big mouse. I got to tell you, it's a super large mouse. It's a whole hand mouse. Literally. So my hand just rests on the entire mouse. So I never have this thing where I'm at the end of the day where I'm, an eagle trying to catch something. No, it just sits right on top. Now it's awful for gaming, for those of you wondering. Horrible for gaming. But it works. It is called a hand shoe mouse. How you like that? Of course it is. Hand shoe mouse. And it works really quite well for someone who just wants, because I'm here all the time. And it's not great for gaming because it's so big that you try to move around, for FPS, it's not going to work for you. For Diablo, not great at all. For something like EVE Online, where you're sort of clicking, but you're not interacting at that split-second level, perhaps that would be okay. But there you go. There's my review of the hand shoe mouse. If you want to see all of the things that are on my desk and what's here, you can go to professormesser.com/studio. Make that happen. We got about 30 seconds before we get started. I also want to say Shinobu B with the $19.99 super chat. Congratulations. Very nice. Thank you so much for your support. No specific question. Just helping support what we're doing here. Just keeping things moving. Just making it happen. Let's get our keynote up. That's the presentation software we use to make this whole party go. That works. This looks good. That looks good. That looks all right. Things are working. Oh, that's always good when things are working, isn't it? Now we can get rid of the lower third. We can adjust here. We are getting here at the top. I'm on top of the hour. It is the top of the hour, so time to get this thing started. Stand by, everybody. Here we go. Let's see if we can get things started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 2023 Professor Messer N10-008 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and you answer online, live, as you are here watching this live stream. So stick around for that. We'll tell you in just a moment how you can participate with that. In the meantime, also let you know that we have, in the second hour, our after show, which is really just more an extension of this show. But in the after show, I have you ask me questions, so stick around for that. We have questions that we will go through. Anything you'd like to ask about IT or certifications or technology or anything, I'll take questions about pretty much anything. So we'll figure out the details and give you more information in just a bit. If you are here live and you're watching this on a live stream, you can put your question, your answer into the questions I'm going to ask by popping open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA. There's also an app that you can get for this. The app is called the Vevox app. It's kind of an odd name, but it works pretty well. Vevox app is what you're looking for, and it will ask you for a session ID. You'll see this session ID throughout the stream today. It is 101-124-435. And if you do all of that, you'll see there's a question waiting for you asking where you're joining from. We have people joining from all over the world. You can see lots of folks checking in from Canada, U.S., got folks out in the South America, in Europe, in Africa, folks in India checking in. Thanks for being here. We've got a lot to go through today. Now that you're in the Vevox app, now you can easily have a look at what other things might be there. In fact, there is a little Q&A tab along the top. That's where you can submit questions for the second hour. So you don't have to wait for me. If you have a question that comes up and you realize that's something you should ask, you can put it right in there to have those things happen. So I have for you today a question, and this is what we'll usually do at the beginning of the live stream, is go through a question from last time to see what we remember or perhaps don't remember about this particular question. This question asks, a laptop's Ethernet connection is performing slower than expected. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Now, our standing rules, of course, are that we do not answer in the chat room. Please answer by following the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, or follow the link that is here. Let me move myself out of the way there. A laptop's Ethernet connection is performing slower than expected. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Is it duplex mismatch, jumbo frames, spanning tree, speed mismatch, or WPA3 enabled? There are the different options available to you. So lock in your answer. Let's see how you do with this one. And we're going to come back to this question in just a moment. Well, thanks for joining us. We're able to do these live streams thanks to your ongoing support. But of course, we're not always doing a live stream. You can go to professormesser.com/YouTube and see all of the videos, the replays of all of the previous study groups, and all of the video content we create. We post it right there on YouTube. Of course, we have weekly pop quiz questions that are available on professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram. So we have a number of different places you can go to see what's going on here. And of course, I didn't put Discord on here, but that's also a very popular link for our site, professormesser.com/Discord, where you'll find our online chat. It's a great community. People are always in there studying one thing or another, and it's a great place to learn more about the Network Plus exam. Network Plus, of course, is an exam called the N10-008. That's the version of the exam that we are currently using. It was a version of the exam released on September the 15th of 2021, which means we think that this exam will probably retire somewhere around March of 2025. We don't have an official date yet, but if we do the math, 3.5 years is usually what it is until the retirement date arrives. It's a single exam that you have to pass. This single exam is 90 minutes long, and you can get a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions. And on the exam, the scoring range is on a scale from 100 to 900, and you need to score a 720. Now, what does that mean? We don't know. Really, we don't have a way to determine if it's a certain number of questions or if it's not a certain number of questions. We don't know. Each question we know is worth a different number of points, so it's impossible to sort of reverse engineer the scoring. All you can really do is do the best you can, and at the end of the exam, you'll see if you reached that very important 720 point area. So hopefully you'll get there. Just 720 and above is what you'd like. On the exam itself, you'll get multiple choice questions and performance-based questions, and I'll ask you some of those even today. You'll get a little bit of both of that in today's live stream. Also let you know that we have quite a bit that we go through. We always reference the objectives when we're doing these live streams, so make sure you get a copy of these objectives. They are free. I have a link over to the CompTIA website where you can go to professormesser.com/objectives. Also let you know that on our website, of course, you can watch every single video that's available, but we have a downloadable version of these videos. We have audio that you can download. We have a course notes book. We have an exam hacks ebook and a lot more that can help you get over that line to earn your Network Plus certification. If you'd like to learn more about that, head over to our website or type in professormesser.com/netsuccess. This live stream is available for replay immediately afterwards on YouTube. I also have an audio-only version of this, which is perfect if you are commuting or you're in the gym and you would like to listen in on what we're doing. This podcast version can be found at professormesser.com/podcast. That's a great place to go to find all of our live stream content for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. If you're on YouTube, you'll find that about a day later, you'll see that the replay is available immediately after this, but in about a day, my marketing manager, Lori, goes through this video, probably at 2x speed. Hi, Lori. How are things? She's listening in and putting into the YouTube video description all of these timestamps. So you'll be able to find exactly the question or answer you're looking for just by clicking on that timestamp value, and it jumps forward in the video. So you can find exactly what you are looking for when you're working through these Network Plus exam questions. Hopefully you can now see that this goes back for years, so hopefully you can find exactly what you are looking for. I mentioned earlier our Discord. If you want to find that, it's professormesser.com/Discord. There are also invitation links available on my website. The upper right of my website is one. You'll see there's a Discord link there that you can follow for that as well. Eventually, you're going to need to take your Network Plus exam. I'm suspecting this anyway. And if you're in the US or Canada, why would you pay full price on the CompTIA site when I have discounted vouchers on professormesser.com? Visit professormesser.com/vouchers. Not only will you have access to discounted vouchers that don't require any coupon codes, you don't have to have extensions built into your browser. There's nothing extra you have to do. They are simply discounted on the Professor Messer website. And if you're someone who is working towards taking this exam, I'd like to give you my tips and tricks for passing this exam. This is my exam hacks ebook that can help take you through the process of taking a CompTIA exam and give you ideas of how you could study better, and perhaps even more importantly, tips that you can use during the exam itself that could potentially get you some extra points. And sometimes those extra points is all you need to pass that certification. Find out more about these at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier. A laptop's Ethernet connection is performing slower than expected. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? I'm going to close the poll and let's have a look at the results. We can see that 62% or so say that the answer we're looking for is duplex mismatch. We have 21% that said it's speed mismatch. We have single digits for spanning tree at 6%, jumbo frames at about 6%, and then WPA3 at 4 or 5%. So we've got a few things that we can look at here, but obviously the largest number is that 62% of you that say duplex mismatch. And if you're trying to find a problem on the network, it probably is something related to duplex mismatch. This is where you get into questions and issues about trying to find problems. And one of the things that you will find is that if it's an incorrect speed, a speed mismatch, it's not going to connect at all. But if it's a duplex mismatch, you tend to see a large number of late collisions. Collisions suddenly start showing up, even if it's a full duplex connection, because one side is set to full duplex and one side is set to half duplex. So the problem you're going to see is collisions on the network. And that is how you would probably be able to tell immediately as you're watching, especially the late collisions counter begin going up. And you're thinking, why are we seeing late collisions? That's very unusual to see late collisions on a properly configured Ethernet network. And that probably will lead you down the road of finding something like a mismatch. Now, during that time, everything still continues to work, but you'll find that it is not working as efficiently as it would be if both sides were set to the same duplex setting. So that is exactly what we were looking for here, was a duplex mismatch. And most of you realized, oh yes, it's duplex mismatch. We had 62% of you that said that's exactly what it is. And that's why it would not be a speed mismatch, because if one side is set to one speed and one side set to the other, it simply won't connect. That's why we almost always do that auto negotiate, so that we don't have to worry about a problem with a speed mismatch. Jumbo frames, having jumbo frames turned on actually would make things run faster, not slower. Spanning tree is capability within your switch to prevent loops. It has nothing to do with the performance of your device communicating. And WPA3 is a wireless encryption protocol. That would not be an issue, especially over an Ethernet connection. Doesn't apply at all. The answer here, the one that makes the most sense, is indeed a duplex mismatch, and 62% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Let's shift gears a little bit, because I have for you a question that is a performance-based question. Performance-based questions are questions that are not multiple choice. The one we just looked at was a multiple choice question, where there was a question and then multiple selections to choose from. A performance-based question is a question that is anything but multiple choice. It could be fill in the blank. It could be a matching question. It could be drag and drop. There, you might have to put things in a particular order. There's lots of different ways to ask questions of what's happening. So I have for you, as I do with every study group, a brand new performance-based question for us to go through. This one's sort of a fill in the blank, but you'll see it's not quite a fill in the blank as we step through here. There's other options we can go through with this. And let's see today what our performance-based question happens to be. It's a question that asks, associate an OSI layer to each of these descriptions. So I have for you 5 different OSI layers to choose from. In fact, it might be easier to see them on this view. So here are the 5 different views that are available. They are: a firewall blocks all traffic using TCP/80. What OSI layer is associated with that? A login process requires a second factor using SMS. What OSI layer is that? A technician pings a server at 10.10.22.17. Next one is an Ethernet connection is inactive due to a speed mismatch. See how I threw that in there? And then the last one is the MAC address of a workstation is 9 Charlie 760 Echo 701203. I knew that whenever I worked through these, that I would have to say all of the MAC address details during this. So that's a little bonus for you. So if you think you know what the answer is, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA or head over to vevox.app and use the ID of 101124435 to lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what it is. There's a lot on this exam you need to know about. OSI models is right there near the front of the exam objectives. It's one of the first things you learn as you're stepping through Network Plus, or really networking in general. It is the, for lack of a better term, sort of a universal language that we can use when describing network operations to other folks, especially folks we may not be working with day to day. So we can tell someone that we believe a problem exists at a particular OSI layer, then everybody understands what we're talking about at that point. Very common to use, something we use every day in previous positions I've had, both in networking and in security. I'd use references to the OSI model multiple times a day. So it's something the industry will certainly be able to walk you through and get you more familiar with. Lock in your answer. I can see all of the answers are people putting in what they think it happens to be. And all you really have to do is put in what you think the correct answer might be. If you think they're all OSI layer 1, you would put in 11111. That's all you have to type in. You don't have to type in anything else but that. And of course, this is something where you do have to already be familiar with the OSI model. So Make sure you're familiar with everything related to the OSI model. We'll talk more about where this information is in the course so that if some of these don't look familiar to you or you're not able to discern the important bit of text in this description, then we'll give you an idea where you can find out more information about that. Let's step through each one of these and see how we did. We'll start with the one at the very top, which is a firewall blocks all traffic using TCP port 80. That's what that TCP/80 means. Really, it's blocking all web traffic, I guess, using TCP port 80, or perhaps this is on a server that only provides services on TCP port 80. You certainly have options there to be able to choose from those. So if you think about the OSI model, anytime we're talking about the TCP protocol or the UDP protocol, and it really doesn't matter which specific port number we're talking about, we're referring to OSI layer 4. Anytime you have transport information, that's where we need to focus on. So if you see in a message or you're talking about allowing or blocking traffic based on a TCP or UDP port, you're talking about the OSI layer 4. Next on our list is a login process requires a second factor using SMS. Not a great second factor. I look forward to your cards and letters, of course. You'll send me emails and tell me what a horrible thing it is to use SMS as a way to have a multiple factor of authentication, but it's still in use out there. And first, I agree with you completely. Using SMS as a method of authentication is a horrible way because it's so easy to spoof information, redirect SMS information, and get that into the hands of the bad guys. But they're still out there. I still get services that use only SMS as an authentication factor, and it's better than nothing, which is not great, but it is better than nothing. And since we are dealing with a login process, we're dealing with some type of application that we're using, we can put that into layer 7. So that, of course, is where we would focus on. We've got an application at the application layer, so layer 7 is where we would focus our efforts. Third on our list is a technician pings a server at 10.10.22.17. Just sending a ping. But here you can clearly see that the ping is going to an IP address. So whether it was an IP address here or a fully qualified domain name, an FQDN, both of those are dealing with something at the IP address level that fits perfectly into OSI layer 3. Anytime we're talking about an IP address, a private address, a public address, a unicast address, a broadcast address, we're talking about layer 3. So that's your key, that's your special information to find to be able to see 10.10.22.17. That's where you would run into those. We've also got a fourth option here. An Ethernet connection is inactive due to a speed mismatch. We just talked in a previous message or previous question that speed mismatches will definitely cause a system not to work properly at all. They would simply will not connect to each other. We won't get a link light. There's no way to send any information over that connection if there's no link light. Well, I guess if there's no link, the light is sort of secondary, isn't it? So anytime we're dealing with things at that physical layer of being able to send signal from one side of the network to another or one device to another, and the issue is related to getting the signal to propagate properly from one place to another, that is a layer 1 physical layer of the OSI model. So hopefully that gives you some perspective of where you can focus with physical layer issues. Maybe that gives you some as well. Last on our list is the MAC address of a workstation is 9 Charlie 76 0 Echo 701203. So there you go. I think that should at least help a little bit by me spelling out what the MAC address happens to be. The real key here, though, is that it's a MAC address. And anytime we see anything related to a media access control, because in this context, MAC is referring to media access control, it really means your MAC address, your physical address on this device, or your data link address, another way to do it. And data link addresses are layer 2 in the OSI model. So there are our 5 different descriptions and what layers we would associate with each of those. And as you can see, there are these key values within each one of these that should point you in a proper direction to find that particular OSI layer to be able to submit that information. So hopefully that gives you at least some ideas of things you can do. Down here at the bottom is the N10-008 section 1.1. The video this comes from is called Understanding the OSI Model. So if you are looking at this question and wondering, what are you talking about? What is an OSI? What are we referring to in this context? That's the video you want to look at, which is Understanding the OSI Model in section 1.1. So hopefully that gives you at least some perspective of things you would need to know about. And hopefully now you can see that performance-based questions are really the same information you would answer for a multiple choice-based question. They're just presented in a different form. Nothing to worry about. If you know the content from the exam objectives, you'll be able to answer these questions without any problems whatsoever. Let's now shift gears back to a multiple choice-based question. This multiple choice-based question is here, and it asks, a user's DNS requests may be transmitted to one of many geographically separated DNS servers on the internet. Which of the following would best describe this communication method? Would that be unicast, broadcast, simulcast, anycast, or multicast? I have to see which one it happens to be. See if you know what these are. The question again asks, a user's DNS request may be transmitted to one of many geographically separated DNS servers on the internet. Which of the following would best describe this communication method? Is it unicast, broadcast, simulcast, anycast, or multicast? There's where you go. On your screen, you can either visit professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer, or you can follow the links for the Vevox information at the top that you can use in a browser or be able to work through these questions that you might have about these. Now, almost all of the questions and answers you see that I provide are really talking about very specific items from the exam objectives. But there may be times when I put information on the screen that has nothing to do with the exam objectives. This might be one of those questions. We'll have to see if it really is one of those questions. Lock in your answers. I see a number of you putting your answers in now. You're doing so I always wonder at that point, do we all know what the answer is, or did we all go a different direction? Or is it just a mixture of different things? Well, we'll have to see exactly what that happens to be. Let's stop our polling here. And there we've now locked in those 116 answers, and you can see that in our list, 41% say it's multicast. We have 24% say broadcast, 18% said anycast, 13% said unicast, and only 1.72% said simulcast. And in this particular case, simulcast is the one I snuck in that really wasn't related to anything. That was a one that I made up in this particular view. So in this case, we can already kind of cross out simulcast because it doesn't exist as one of those. So hopefully this is a pretty good one if you're trying to break through all of these different terms. And it sounds like simulcast sounds like it could be a real thing. But in this particular case, it is not. What we were hoping to find, the thing that we were looking for, was anycast. Anycast is where there is a single destination IP address that has multiple places to go. So hopefully that gives you a perspective of where you can go with those. This is a pretty good term that you will find, the term that you'll often hear this described as one-to-one of many. So it seems like there would be a single device, but no, actually, all of these green devices are a possible destination, but with anycast, your device will find the closest one or the most effective or efficient one, depending on the configuration. So that looks like it's something like a unicast address, but the difference is that could go to many different places depending on, for instance, where you might be in the world. It's a good way to geographically disperse one single service and be able to make that happen. So hopefully that's something you're able to see. Unicast addresses are very commonly used in situations like DNS. That's a good example of one where you're trying to find the closest DNS server and be able to break down where that happens to be. So anycast really is the one that best describes what we have here. That is what we were hoping to see. Let's see if I want to show the results of that. I was hoping to sort of lock in the right answer with this, and I can. I just didn't break it down on my side. There you go. And if you want more information on this particular question and you're wondering, wait, what is this? I need to find that. You need to go to N10-008. The video is in number 1.4, and it's called Network Communication. So that's the one that is the correct answer, Anycast. Now, we have other options here. I already mentioned that simulcast is not a type of networking protocol. It is more accurately describes a way to distribute video. Perhaps something you would watch on television is being simulcast on many different stations simultaneously. So not a networking term. Unicast is a one-to-one communication. That does not describe what we're talking about here. Broadcast is a one-to-everyone communication. That's certainly not what we're doing. We really don't like broadcasts. They are a necessary evil. The goal with broadcasts is to limit how many of them are on your network at any particular time, and sometimes that can be challenging. And multicast, although you would think this would be somewhat applicable, multicast is one where you are sending information to multiple devices simultaneously. In this case, having separated DNS servers, you're only communicating requests to one of many separated DNS servers. If this was multicast, you'd be sending it to multiple devices at the same time, which does not describe this question. In this particular case, we were looking for Anycast, and we have about 19% of you that did choose that as the answer to this question. So kind of a tricky one. Anycast isn't something you really run into very commonly either. It's very unusual to find a network configured with some need or requirement for Anycast, so it's probably not unusual that it's one that would be your last choice for a question like this. Unfortunately, in this case, it was the correct choice for what we were looking for. But that's okay. We can jump back and do a different question. Let's see how you do with this one. This question asks, a user's mobile phone automatically switches between access points while walking across the company's large campus. Which of the following would best describe this process? Would that be WPA3, ESSID, split tunnel, MU-MIMO, or ad hoc? All sound very wireless type technologies to me. Let's try it again. A user's mobile phone automatically switches between access points while walking across the company's large campus. Which of the following would best describe this process? Is it WPA3, ESSID, split tunnel, MU-MIMO, or ad hoc? And as always, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Instead, we want to go to professormesser.com/QA or follow the links on your screen to lock it in natively with Vevox.app. Maybe this is one you already know. Maybe you are even doing this in the company where you work today. You might not even think about it if you were going through something like this. You might you start at one end of the building and you walk through the rest of the building. And when you get through that process, you realize, wow, I've now jumped to multiple access points, but I never lost link access. I've still had connectivity the entire time. You might have taken advantage of something like this. So see if you know it. See if you think you know what the answer for this might be. And eventually you may be tasked with setting up this particular kind of technology. So it is rather important that you know what these happen to be. So we've got a number of folks that have answered this one. They've locked in what they think the correct answer might be. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a user's mobile phone automatically switches between access points while walking across the company's large campus. Which of the following would best describe this process? Is it WPA3, ESSID, split tunnel, MU-MIMO, or ad hoc? We'll stop the poll, and we can see that of the 131 people that have answered, about 50% say it's ESSID. If we went right down the middle, that's what the most of you chose in this case. 17% said MU-MIMO, 16% say ad hoc, 10% say WPA3, and only 5% or so say split tunnel. This is one of these questions, though, that it's important to know these technologies because we're probably using them all the time. It's probably a technology that we're very familiar with, but it's one that we just have never run into before. We've never had to configure it ourselves. What we were hoping to find with this is extending a network across a very large area and making it a seamless extension for your users so they don't have to constantly reconnect to an access point whenever they happen to move outside the range of one they were using previously. So we want to be able to effectively have our own type of roaming using 802.11 on our local campus. And we refer to that sharing of access points with the same name as an extended service set identifier, an ESSID. This is the problem with acronyms, of course, is we never say them. We always say, oh, it's the ESSID. In fact, we often forget what ESSID might actually mean, but it does stand for, indeed, Extended Service Set Identifier. It works like this, exactly as you might expect. You are in one part of a building, and you've got your mobile phone maybe connected on the SGC1 access point. You can see it's an access point that has a very specific MAC address, or in the world of wireless networking, that is also called the BSSID, the Basic Service Set Identifier. This is one where, of course, there's lots of folks on this network. And now you start walking maybe to another building across campus, and your phone suddenly is out of range of the original access point. But fortunately, you have been smart enough to configure an ESSID that is identical to the service set ID that was on the original access point. And if those are configured correctly, even though it's a completely different physical device, you will set up automatically a connection to the access point that happens to be closest to you. This makes it very easy to maintain that connectivity wherever you happen to go on the network, and it's one that works seamlessly. Your users don't even know what's going on. All they know is they always have connectivity, and it doesn't matter where they happen to be on campus because you've done all of the hard work of engineering your wireless network, putting the antennas in the proper locations, setting the strength for the signals, making sure that wherever you happen to be, you can connect to one of these access points that's part of a larger ESSID. And that is the answer we were looking for, was ESSID. I keep forgetting to show my results on here. That ESSID that we were hoping to find is the one that is the correct answer, and about 50% of you got that one absolutely correct. This comes from my video 2.4 Wireless Technologies. If you'd like to read up more on ESSID and some of the other technologies used in wireless networking, including technologies like these, like WPA3. We've already mentioned on this live stream that WPA3 is an encryption algorithm commonly seen in wireless networks. So if you have a relatively new access point, you'll probably have the option for enabling WPA3, but that's for encryption. It doesn't talk about moving from one access point to another over a large area. We have MU-MIMO, multi-user, multiple input, multiple output, and that's about 17-18% of the folks that answered this one. That is referring to the ability to send multiple streams of data over the same frequency at the same time to, in this case, multiple users. That is a technology that's only available on certain types of wireless networks, and you should see what options are available for your AC or AX networks to be able to perform multi-user MIMO. We have ad hoc. 16 or 17% of you chose ad hoc. Ad hoc is a way to communicate between two wireless devices without using an access point. Well, in this case, we're moving between access points. So immediately when access points are being used, you can throw out ad hoc. It's not ad hoc. We know it can't be ad hoc because ad hoc is only between two devices directly without using an access point. And then lastly, only 5% of you chose split tunnel. We most commonly think of split tunnel being used on something like a VPN, where some of the data you're sending across the VPN will be encrypted, but other data that perhaps doesn't need to traverse that private link can remain non-encrypted or in a plain text form, and that would be referred to as a split tunnel, where some of the data is split into the tunnel, some is split out of the tunnel. Has nothing to do with the scenario we have here. Still an interesting technology, but not the answer we were looking for. Only 5% of you chose split tunnel. In this case, the only answer that really makes sense is an ESSID, and about 50% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done with that. Well, as you can tell, there are a lot of different topics to learn in Network Plus. And if you look at my course, it's almost 100 videos, 93 videos long, over 14 hours of content. It's a big course. There's a lot you need to know to earn your Network Plus. And of course, I'm hoping that everyone would have time to go through all 93 videos and watch all 14 hours of content. And of course, you're writing your own notes and you've got all of the content from every video in your notes. Well, that's a lot to ask of someone, I realize. So what I thought I would do is take all the information from the course about fiber connectors and OSI models and understanding the wireless technologies and trying to figure out details about how data is communicated from one part of the network to another. And I simply put everything into one single document. These are my course notes, and they're available on professormesser.com. You can find them there. They are first either a PDF that contains a list of everything that's in my videos, all of the text, all of the important charts that I've created, all of the important graphics, the tables, everything is in these set of course notes. You don't miss anything. They're all there. And you can either have it in this digital PDF form that you see on the screen, or you can have it in a physical form, which of course is identical to what you see on the screen, but it's in a format that is paper, so you can take it along with you. And if you purchase the physical edition of this, you get the digital edition for free. So the moment you purchase your physical edition, you can download the digital edition and then wait for this to be delivered to you, because I have to print it, I have to put it in an envelope, it has to be shipped over to you. It does take a bit of time. So I like to be able to give you something you can start working on right now. Find all of that, and of course the choices for using those are available on my website at professormesser.com/NPCN for your Network Plus course notes, or you can simply go to the Professor Messer website. It's in the pull-down menus at the top of the page. Let's do some more questions. And I do want to say, by the way, those of you that are purchasing these course notes, obviously my entire course is available to watch for free, but this is something that does help us continue to make these courses. So you are helping pay this forward, if you will, and having other courses made available and things that normally we would not be able to do without your support. So thank you so much for the folks that are either have purchased this in the past or you're considering purchasing this today. We really do appreciate your help. Let's do some more questions. Next on our list is this question that asks, which of the following would be the best way to receive alerts from a router for all significant network events? Would that be HTTPS broadcast, SNMP trap, MAC spoofing, 802.1x, or LACP? I have a number of different options, all real things. The question again asks, which of the following would be the best way to receive alerts from a router for all significant network events? Is it HTTP broadcast, SNMP trap, MAC spoofing, 802.1x, or LACP? Now, if you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. As always, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Just follow the links on your screen and lock in your answer. If you are not here live, obviously you won't be able to answer this in a live stream. You should join us live. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock it in now. And if you're wondering when the next live event is going to be, go to professormesser.com/calendar or follow the calendar link on our website, and you can find out exactly when the next live event. And in fact, these live events tend to change quite a bit. So I tell people all the time, make sure you check in with the calendar because you never know when things might change, and we may have to change some of these dates, which happened on this event. I originally scheduled this for yesterday and I had to push it one day. So it's a really good example why going to the calendar can really help you with knowing when the next live event is going to happen. Let's see how you did with this one. We got a number of you that have locked in your answers, so let's see how you did. Which of the following would be the best way to receive alerts from a router for all significant network events? Is it HTTPS broadcast, SNMP trap, MAC spoofing, 802.1x, or LACP? Let's stop the polling, and we can see that 73% of you say the answer is SNMP trap. We have 11% that said LACP, and at this point, everything goes down to single digits with HTTPS broadcast at 6.62% and 802.1x at 6.62%. A two-way tie for third place. And then in fourth place, we have MAC spoofing at 2%. So this is a pretty good example of everyone jumping into one of these answers. 73% is a pretty big number, but is it the right number to be able to work through this? The question is about receiving alerts from a router for all significant network events. And one really good way to do this is by having a trap sent from the networking device to a central network management station, specifically an SNMP compatible network management station. Normally, if you've looked through our videos on SNMP, you know that SNMP itself, the core part of the protocol, is one that is very reactive. It really doesn't give you a heads up. You have to poll a device, you have to query a device, and to be able to gather information about it. So the way that most SNMP management workstations operate is every minute, every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, or whatever it happens to be, at the standard interval, it goes out to the device, pulls back the answer to that poll. You may ask it, are you up and running? Yes, I am. How much data has been transferred through the device since I asked last? Well, this much has. How many errors have you seen on this network? Well, here's how many errors. So you have to query the device to be able to understand what may be there. Now, SNMP has another feature inside of it, built into the protocol, that can provide a more proactive view of what's going on, where if the device supports it, you can configure an SNMP trap. Why we called it a trap, I don't know. It's really an alert. It's an alarm. That's the term most of us in the industry use to describe what this is, but that's the way it's described in the SNMP request for comments, the RFC. The SNMP traps can be configured on the device. They communicate back over UDP port 162, and you would set a threshold. So, for example, maybe you would like to know if between queries, if we happen to see the number of CRC errors suddenly increase, we would like that device, instead of us having to query it, why doesn't it just let us know? Send us a note proactively without me having to ask that says, I just saw a lot of queries happen. So, and we saw CRCs suddenly increase on this device. There was traffic going through and we saw a burst of CRCs. So I thought I'll let you know. That may be something you want to know about because you did configure the trap. And so now I can send you information that says this did increase. Maybe you want to know if anything spikes from a utilization perspective. Maybe if it's running out of memory. What if you're having a problem with late collisions? So those types of things can be very valuable to know. And it's one of those situations where maybe you don't want to query every minute to know if there's a CRC error problem. Instead, we'll just have the device be able to tell us proactively. So that's where we're going through. That proactive view of the world is an SNMP trap. That's what we were hoping to find. And we had a lot of folks answer SNMP in this one. In fact, 73% answered the SNMP trap because it's the right answer. You did pretty good on that one. Of course, we have these other options like 11% of you said LACP. The Link Aggregation Control Protocol is a protocol commonly associated with putting in multiple links between devices, most commonly switches. So you may have seen network connections where you're connecting switches together with a 1 gig connection, but maybe you'd like more than 1 gig of throughput. All right, let's plug in a separate line between those switches. Well, we can't do that. It would create a loop. So instead, we'll configure this multi-link configuration between the switches. Different manufacturers call it a different thing. And we'll set up a protocol to automatically create this grouping of links between switches and treat them as one big link. And the protocol that's able to do this automatically is called the Link Aggregation Control Protocol, or LACP. LACP is not required to have that multi-link type of configuration, but it is something that can make it a little bit easier. But in this case, we're talking about getting alerts from routers, and LACP has nothing to do with that. So that would not be the right answer. 6% say it's HTTP broadcast. They also said 6% said 802.1x. HTTPS broadcast is something we don't commonly see. HTTPS is not something that's commonly broadcast. I sort of combined two different networking terms here to create something that no one's ever seen before, which is an HTTPS broadcast. HTTPS itself does not lend itself to be a broadcast. I imagine technically it's possible that you could do that, but it's certainly not practical, and it's not something you commonly see, and it's not used by routers to send information about significant network events. 802.1x is an authentication protocol, and in this case, we're not authenticating, we're sending traps, we're sending alerts, we're sending alarms, so that's not the protocol that we would use either. And lastly, MAC spoofing. Spoofing is sort of a funny term. It's one that describes you taking a device and making it look as if it were something else. And with MAC spoofing, we might take the MAC address of one device and use that same MAC address on a different device. Now, there's many reasons that you would want to do this. There's probably more reasons why you would not want to do this, but there are cases where you might need to provide some type of MAC spoofing. I can think of a very common example of a router that you would have at home needs to have a particular MAC address as defined by your internet service provider. That's not commonly done, but I have seen it, and many of the routers that you use at home have a space in there where you can define what you would like the administratively configured MAC address to be on that device. So that's why when you see MAC spoofing, that's probably just as easily said an administratively assigned MAC address on that device, and that's the media access control address or the physical address on that device. In this case, the one that we were really looking for was the Simple Network Management Protocol, that's SNMP, and it's a feature of SNMP called a trap that provides alarms and alerts. That's the answer we were looking for, and that's the one we were hoping to find here. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email where you would be certified on a 1-hour continuing education unit credit in the webinar category. The way that you would earn that CEU is you have to follow these steps. And if you do not follow these steps, you will not earn the CEU. Fortunately, super easy to do. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a link there for Contact Us. Click the Contact Us link, and in the body of that form, or in the list of fields of that form, put your name, your email address. It asks you for a subject line, and in the subject line, if you would put August 2023, that's all you have to put there. You could put Network Plus if you wanted, but I know what it's for. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, SNMP trap. That's the super secret code words of the month. And then if you want to put other information into the body of that message, I do read through every single one of them. I'm unfortunately not able to respond back to everybody because I get hundreds of these in a month. But it is something I do like to read through. Tell me where you are with your studies, maybe why you're getting this CEU, or anything else that you might have a question or an idea about. It might be something I can always bring to the study group the next time we have one. Again, the process is you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, put in your click the Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address, put in the subject line that this is August 2023, and in the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month, SNMP trap. That's what we were looking for, and that will absolutely get you to the queue where I usually process these in about a week. So please be patient with me. I will get these back to you. If you have questions about it or problems, or you need something done quickly, you can always send me a note separately, either on Discord or a separate message on the Contact Us page. And that helps me know that you need that a little bit faster than what would normally be there. Let's do another question. We have time for one more at least. Maybe we can fit in another. Let's see how we do here. This next question asks, the internet connection to a distant site has failed. Which of the following would be the best way to remotely manage the router at this location? Would it be VPN, VDI, secure shell, RDP, or out-of-band connection? The internet connection to a distant site has failed. Which of the following would be the best way to remotely manage the router at this location? Would it be VPN, VDI, secure shell, RDP, or out-of-band connection? It's got to be one of those. Those are all 5 real things, all from the exam objectives. Make sure you're familiar with them. Lock in your answer. Go to the links on your screen at professormesser.com/QA, or follow the Vevox links, or use the QR code right there on the screen to lock in what you believe the right answer to be. As always, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. We'll figure out what these happen to be. SNMP is it's an acronym, the Simple Network Management Protocol. And then TRAP is not an acronym. TRAP is just trap. It's TRAP. It's the word trap, like a bear trap, Uh, I'm in Florida, so bears are top of mind. It's a bear trap. You have to think about that. The black bears, but we don't use bear traps. Well, I'm not sure we're allowed to use bear traps in Florida. That's another one. What do you do if a bear shows up? I don't know. I give them a picnic basket. I don't know how that works. We have to worry about bears and where they go. We don't generally see bear spray in the stores here. You know, if you go into the mountains, you go out west, you can buy bear spray at the grocery store. We don't have bear spray. We do have guns in Florida, but I'm not sure you're allowed to shoot the bears either. It's one of those. I guess if it was, we have to do the South Park thing. It's coming straight for us. Then I guess you could shoot it. But you better have some proof for those if that happens. Let's see how we do with this. I'm looking forward to the lawyers sending me more information on that one. The question again asks, the internet connection to a distant site has failed. Which of the following would be the best way to remotely manage the router at this location? Would it be VPN, VDI, Secure Shell, RDP, or out-of-band connection? How did you do? Well, we got a couple good answers here. 41% say Secure Shell is what we would use. For 34% say out-of-band connection, and 11% say RDP. Then we have single digits. About 7% say VPN, and 6% say VDI. This is an interesting problem, and usually it's not something we run into where you're trying to connect to a distant site. You get a call on the phone. That's where people talk to you using voice. And they say, our network is down. The whole link is down. We just looked outside, and there's a piece of machinery that is digging up the ground outside. Do you think they might have broken our internet connection? Well, they most certainly did. The backhoes of the world are very good. If you're ever trying to find any wires anywhere, you just put a backhoe right in the middle of the place and it'll find it very, very quickly. They will just dig up those wires. It's very good at locating. You don't need any special location tools. You just need a backhoe. And the backhoes are always going through your cables, your wires, and your internet connections, which is great that you know that happened. Because now you need to think about, how do we connect to this site to be able to maybe redirect them to a secondary connection or provide some type of support, but they don't have an internet connection. This is a little bit of a sort of a catch-22 to be able to make that happen. So what we're looking to do then is find some way around the backhoe, find some way around the issue that we're having there. And what we would like to use then is some type of out-of-band connection. Out-of-band connections, OOBs, are connections where we can use a separate network link to gain access to a particular device or facility. That separate link there is one that you would obviously need to set up beforehand. It's not something that's just always there. And if you have a remote site like that, it's very, very common to have a sort of a permanent primary network connection to the internet. But then you might also have a separate dial-in connection or separate internet connectivity. It's not unusual, for example, for some folks to have a primary internet connection either over maybe cable modem, Fios, some other type of fiber-based connection, or even maybe it's satellite. But now, for some reason, a cable was cut, the device is no longer working, something with that network connection is no longer operating. But almost always when you're setting up a site like that, you'll bring in a different connection that's using cellular connection. Maybe it's going to use, maybe if you're using cable modem for your primary connection, you bring in a DSL connection from a different internet service provider. Now, obviously, we have to worry about the backhoe. Maybe one of the wires comes in one side of the building and the other set of the wires comes in the other side of the building. Not really kidding about that. That's a very common method of configuring multiple connections to a single building because of the backhoe effect. We want to be sure to avoid where that might be. Those backhoe drivers are really good, though. They'll probably find it if that happens. Usually you're plugging into a separate management connection on those, and it's usually a serial connection, or it says console, or it says COM port, or something of that sort. Most of your modern devices, it's a USB connection. It's very clear that that's what it's designed to be. On older devices, it might be a modem that you plug into those, or there might be a centralized communications server, a COM server. You connect to the COM server over your out-of-band connection, and the COM server then allows you to connect to all of the other devices in that building. That's a pretty good way to manage a remote site. Very common way to manage a remote site, especially if it's an important remote site. I've worked with more companies than I can think of that have this exact configuration set up, especially for very large remote sites. I've driven out into, you land at an airport and you drive for hours through cornfields, and out in the middle of nowhere is an enormous warehouse for a company because it just happens to be in this centralized place in the middle of the United States. And there's not a lot of connectivity to these sites. There's not a lot of options or choices. So you might need to set up a primary connection through satellite and maybe a secondary connection through cellular. So that's not a bad way to make something like that happen. Very, very common. So that is the case where if you lose the primary connection, well, have you connected in through out of band? How's your OOB connection? And immediately we know, oh, okay, we need to go around this connection and have an out-of-band connection to be able to make that happen. That's what we were hoping to see here is the out-of-band connection. And obviously we had 34% of you, 34 and a third, say it's the out-of-band connection is the right answer, and you'd be right. Now, that wasn't the highest number of responses, though. The plurality of responses went to secure shell. 42% of you say secure shell is what you would use. Now, ultimately, I think that secure shell could possibly be used after you get connectivity, but we already told you that the internet connection has failed. How's the secure shell going to help you? You don't have connectivity to that site to be able to send an SSH connection. First, you would have to enable or set up your connection through out of band. Then you could perform a secure shell or an RDP or any of these other options. But in this case, we don't have a network, so secure shell would not work. For the same reason, RDP here would not work. That RDP, the remote desktop protocol, can't communicate unless there's a network connection. And in this case, our internet connection has failed. So that's not going to be a very good choice for us either. VPN has a similar problem, and VDI also. Virtual desktop interface is more of a cloud-based technology, but you still need connectivity to the internet or to a network to be able to connect to that particular desktop. There's your problem in being able to have those happen. So I think if you're someone who is really working towards, I don't know, trying to find the best possible connection between point A and point B, you would probably, in the case of an outage, need to go around the problem and go out of band instead of in band. That out of band connection could be incredibly important for you. And indeed, that is the right answer. If you answered out of band, 34% of you got that right. If you want more information on this, you can go to our video in section 4.4, the video name called Remote Access, which you can't see because my head's in the way. There it is, 4.4. It is out of band is contained within the remote access section of the video. So something that maybe can help you if you're setting up a network and trying to get all of those working as well. We've got time for another question, so let's do another one. I think this will be great. Next on our list, you want to be a network admin. Well, here's a network admin question for you. The question asks, a network admin needs to intercept all network traffic on a web server. Which of the following tools would be the best choice? Would it be light meter, multimeter, loopback plug, physical tap, or TDR? Got a few there to work through. Is it a network admin needs to intercept all network traffic on a web server? Which of the following tools would be the best choice? Would it be light meter, multimeter, loopback plug, physical tap, or TDR? If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer by visiting professormesser.com/QA or use the links on the screen to visit vevox.app and lock in your answer. Both of them go to the same place, so you can't go wrong. And if you got the Vevox app, you can use the ID 101-124-435 right there on your screen and be able to lock in what you think that answer might be. This one going to make you think. All of those are real things, by the way. All those answers are in the exam objectives, but which one would apply for this particular scenario? And this is not an unusual request for a network admin, so you need to know which tools in your tool bag are going to be the right ones to pull out, and either software or hardware-based tools be able to make something like this happen. Maybe it's one that you've already done this. Maybe some of you have already worked through problems like this. You've had to have these particular tools. Let's see how you do with this one. Not quite as many people jumping on this one to answer it. So I'm giving you a couple of extra seconds to see if you can lock it in and figure out what this happens to be. This might be a good one for you to work through using the right tool for the right job. That's what we're trying to do with this question. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a network admin needs to intercept all network traffic on a web server. Which of the following tools would be the best choice? Would you use a light meter, a multimeter, a loopback plug, a physical tap, or a TDR? And if we close the poll, we can see the answer here. 60% of us say physical tap is what we would use. We've also got a number of people answered that said 18% said loopback plug, and then 17% or almost 18% said TDR. And then we drop down to almost nothing. 2% say multimeter, and less than 1% say light meter with these. So what would the question be? What would the answer be on this one? This becomes a little bit more of a challenge, figuring out the details. But one of the best ways to do this is with a tap, being able to grab data as it's going back and forth. This tap that's there, usually you can work through a tap that's built into a device. Maybe it's a port mirror that you can configure in a switch. That's a good one to use. Or it may be a physical tap, like the one we see on our screen, where you are disconnecting a link and then plugging those two ends back into the tap to complete the connection. And on this tap, there will be a couple of links that go off to an analyzer so that you're able to capture the actual data. Physical taps are great for that, but you sometimes need power, especially if it's something that's a copper-based tap. You might need power to be able to provide additional reconstruction of the video or reconstruction of the signal that's going through. So it will refresh the signal going through the tap. Some taps, like fiber taps, are unpowered because it's simply splitting the light effectively using a prism. So that's the difference between a copper-based and a fiber-based tap anyway. But you don't have to use a tap. There might be port redirection. In the Cisco world, they call it a SPAN, which stands for Switched Port Analyzer, and other ways to capture the actual packets going through the network without needing to put a tap in place. But you would need to have administrative rights and permissions to the switch to be able to make those. And in some environments, you're not able to make changes like that on the fly to a switch. It might be an environment where change control is very, very tight. You are not able to go into enable mode and make any of those changes on the switch. So maybe a physical tap is a better choice. You can put it in place well beforehand, and if you ever need to capture that data, you simply turn on your analyzer and it's already sending data to that specific connection. Here's a better view of that physical tap. You kind of see it there. That is one where you've got information that is coming from one side of the network, and it passes through the tap and goes to the other side. And then you have the other link that does the same thing, connects the tap, passes through, and then ends up going to the other side. So there's sort of the Gazenta ports, as we say in the technical world of things, that connect those two links together. So once the tap's in place, everything's going back and forth and nobody even realizes anything's in the middle. What's happening behind the scenes is it takes a copy of that traffic and sends that copy down to, in this case, it's called monitor. It's very often a protocol analyzer or some other tool that is collecting and showing all of that data and being able to see the packets that are going through the network using a physical tap. That was the answer we were looking for, was the physical tap. And of course, 60% of you chose physical tap. If you want more information on all of these hardware tools, they are in my video in section 5.2 called Hardware Tools. That's what we would choose for this one. And there are a number of different choices we could have selected here. 18% of you said a loopback plug. Loopback plug seems like that's what would work here, is we're sort of looping the information back to us, right? But that's not actually what it does. A loopback plug is one that takes data, sends it out an interface, and then puts it right back into the same interface. So it's a great way to test how well an interface is working, but that effectively breaks the connection. If you're plugging in a loopback plug, there is no connectivity, and you would not be able to intercept network traffic because you've now broken the connection. There is no network traffic. So that's not the case. You'd use a loopback plug if you were trying to perform diagnostics on a physical interface to make sure that everything you're sending out is exactly what you're receiving. It's a great way to check for some type of physical problem. TDR is a time domain reflectometer. It is a fancy way of saying a nice cable tester. A big fancy cable tester is a TDR. Does a lot more than cable testing, of course. TDRs have a way to tell us more information about what's happening on a wire that could be hundreds of feet away inside of a wall. It is able to tell us a lot about the amount of problems we might have with a particular link. It can check for problems with wiring being incorrect or even shorted. So it's a very nice tool to be able to use that. But that doesn't help us intercept network traffic on a web server. A TDR is there to help validate that a particular network connection or the physical wiring or fiber, if it was an OTDR, would be something that might help us understand, is the cable going to work for us? That's not the problem we're having here. We also have two others that not a lot of people chose. Multimeters are used to be able to look at AC or DC voltages on a circuit. We can use it to check the type of wiring inside of a cable. We can check voltage on a connection coming out of the wall for power, but it would not be used to intercept network traffic. That doesn't tell us anything about the network traffic, in fact. And lastly, we've got the light meter, 0.8%, almost a percent of view. Light meters would be used to be able to determine how much light is being sent through a particular fiber connection, but it would not be able to intercept network traffic on a web server. Doesn't even apply, and it makes sense that only 0.8% chose that. What we were looking for was a physical tap. That is the right answer. About 61% of you chose physical tap, and you'd be absolutely right. That is the answer we were looking for, and that's the real challenge we're having, is finding the right answer that would apply for this particular scenario. It's kind of what you'd see on the actual Network Plus exam, and if you answered physical tap, you got that one absolutely correct. Very useful. You'll notice that if you go to the objectives, there's a lot in there. Plenty to find in the objectives, and they're free to be able to find that there. I think if you go through the objectives, you'll be able to locate a lot of great information that's there. And if you're working through the TDRs and OTDRs and fiber cutters and understanding the splicers and everything relating to these tools and so much more, they're all in these objectives. Have a look at the exam objectives for Network Plus. They really do tell you everything you need to know, and they're free. You can download a copy from the CompTIA website. I have a link that goes over to the CompTIA website at professormesser.com/objectives. That can help you understand exactly what you should be studying for. And if somebody wants to know what should I expect on the exam, it's all listed in the objectives. That's how powerful and important these particular objectives are. Make sure you use those before you start your studies, and certainly refer to them before you schedule your exam. They'll be able to give you a barometer on how prepared you are walking into that exam room. And if you are missing anything on this list, circle it, study up. It's a great way to really hone exactly what you need to know for the exam. We do one of these study groups for Network Plus every month. Of course, I have study groups for A+, for Network Plus, for Security Plus. You're welcome to join us for any of those. They're all free, all available at different times of the month. If you'd like to know when your event is going to be, go to professormesser.com/calendar so you can find the A+, the Network Plus, the Security Plus. They're all there. Our next Network Plus study group is currently scheduled for November the 13th. These times are subject to change, and dates are subject to change. So always check back with the calendar to know exactly when the next event is going to be. You'll find that at professormesser.com/calendar, and not shown here, but we're still in August, obviously. And next month, or next week rather, at this same time in September, instead of waiting for September, you can have a Security Plus study group a week from today at 12 noon Eastern. It's right there at professormesser.com/calendar. to be able to find that. Lots to see there, plenty to go through, and we always have some new questions every month. There's never a question that we recycle, so make sure you tune back in for something new every single time, breaking those down. The September study group is on September the 13th. We, of course, have A+ study groups on September the 5th and 7th, and on September the 20th is the next study group for Security Plus. Obviously, our next study group is next week. Be glad to have you back for that one. All of those are in September. Check the calendar for more details. Well, can you believe we went through an hour of Q&A already? We have more coming, though, because you're going to ask me questions. I will open up the questions that are in our Vevox so that you're able to also ask those. They're all available on that list. So you'll find it in the Vevox side where you can ask questions that may be there. So I'll now open that tab in your Vevox so that you can put those into the list and be able to submit some of that Q&A. Don't forget that we have our Success Bundle for Network Plus on our site. Go to professormesser.com/netsuccess. And if you are ready to take your exam in the U.S. or Canada, you can get our discounted vouchers on our site at professormesser.com/vouchers. Don't forget about our fantastic Discord community at professormesser.com/discord. And if you like this video, I would love it if you gave us a thumbs up. It really does help us quite a bit when I'm talking with my associates over on the YouTube side. I have my own reps, my own folks that I can go to, and I would not be able to do that without your support. So thank you for giving a thumbs up. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. It all helps on this side, and it's something you can do for free. So we really do appreciate that. Stick around, though. We got a lot more to go through. There's a lot more details that we'll be able to pour through. And if you have specific questions, our after show is a perfect place to do it. We'll start the after show in just a few seconds. Thanks for being here and joining us. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of a beverage. Let's put up a picture of me. That's not what I wanted to do. I want to do that one. Hi, everybody. It's time for the after show. And now it's the time where you can put questions in to Vevox and be able to get those questions answered. This is the one where you can ask questions about really anything related to Network Plus, about IT, about certifications, about working in the industry, about anything, or even things that may not have anything to do with IT. I'll at least look through the questions and then see what's there. You can ask these questions on the Vevox app. So you go to your Vevox app. It's the same one we were just using for everything else we were working through. Let me bring that back up so you can see. I still have this question up from what we were working on, and probably need to close that question out so that we can really see what's going on. That would be a great idea if I were to do that. So let's close our poll. We got a lot of questions we went through this month. That's great. And let's hide all of that. So there you go. Now you could submit questions at any time. This is one where the questions are on my side and I can kind of see what's going on as we step through them. It's a great way to submit the questions, and then I will simply sort through them on my side. You can, of course, go to Vevox and submit those at any time. We got a lot of questions that are already coming in. I think we should probably start kind of sifting through there and be able to break them down and see what might be available. So the questions, let's start with one that is probably one of a very frequently asked question on the exam. So I'm going to move this over so that we can really have a look at this question. It's from Jonathan, who asks, what's the best way to prepare for performance questions on the Network Plus exam? And this is probably, I think, one of the biggest questions I get, certainly a frequently asked question, because CompTIA doesn't give you a lot of guidance as to what a performance-based question is. And they have tended to evolve what a performance-based question is over time, and I expect we'll probably see more evolution of performance-based questions as time goes on. But I guess their challenge is creating a performance-based question that we could put into a format that can be distributed by the testing organization, which is different than CompTIA. So Pearson is the one that handles the testing part. So yeah, they have to make sure the software that you use is something compatible with a performance-based question. These are really questions that are anything but a multiple choice question. So this could be fill in the blank. It could be matching. It could be a drag and drop. It could be putting things in a particular order. It could be putting you at a command prompt and asking you to perform a function. There's lots of ways to ask questions. And this is really just another way to see if you know what's in the exam objectives. So go to the exam objectives. I think I have a set of these objectives up, for example. Here they are. So here are the objectives for the N10-008. So everything these are well used, as you can see. So everything in the objectives could be asked of you. Now, it could be asked of you in a multiple choice question. We did some of those today, but you could easily have a performance-based question. Let's take, for example, this is a pretty good one to kind of go through. I'm going to go to section 2 of your exam objectives, because in section 2, let's see. No, go to 1, because I have a question in mind that I'd like to use. So let's start with port numbers, for example. So there's a bunch of port numbers in section 1.5 of the exam objectives. And you can see there's a lot here. Well, what if I mix these up? I mix up all the protocol names and I mix up all the port numbers. In fact, maybe I don't use protocol names. Maybe I use a description of what the protocol does. So that's a great place to do it. And for instance, transfer files between devices. Well, what port number would you use for that? Well, it would be FTP, so I would use port 20 or 21. Maybe there's a drag and drop where you would drop in the right port number. Or maybe it's a matching question. You would draw lines between the description of what it is and the port number that's already listed on the screen. So it's the same information that you've studied. It's the same content from the exam objectives. It's simply asked in a different way. And that's why I tell people all the time, don't worry so much about the fact that it is a performance-based question. You should instead just take it on face value that you already know the content, because the performance-based questions are asking information that you already learned in your exam objectives. In reality, if you know the content, it doesn't matter how they ask the question. If you know the content, you'll simply be able to answer it. And it's not a trick question. It's not a hard question. It's not complicated to understand. It's very straightforward. There's usually a specific thing they're asking you to do, and you have to use your knowledge of the exam objectives to be able to answer this particular question. That's it. And I think that's one where if someone's really working through the details of these, you're probably pretty familiar with this. So I think that's the case, especially with performance-based questions, is don't worry about the questions. The questions will take care of themselves. As long as you know the content, as long as you know the exam objectives, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question of you. Let's do some more questions. There's a couple of really good ones that came through with this. And I think there's all sorts of places to go with this. And I think this is a good one to go through. Let's do this one, because this is also top of mind for a lot of folks who are looking for jobs in the industry. And this is from David, who asks, what type of remote jobs could be available with a Network Plus certification? That's probably a pretty good one. This is also one I think a lot of people want to do. They want to be able to take and get a job working remotely, working at home, work from home is what everybody wants to be able to do. It's something we had work from home jobs prior to 2020, prior to everyone being locked down on the event. What are we calling it these days? On the COVID, we were locked down, and then everybody was working from home. And everybody thought, this is great. I can be at home. I don't have to drive to a job. I can still do my work, and I'm still getting paid. This is fantastic. The jobs we had prior to COVID were generally higher level troubleshooting positions. So they were positions, in fact, this is what you would commonly run into. If any of you have ever worked for a service provider, and I mean one of the big service providers, you've worked for an AT&T, a Verizon, a T-Mobile, and I've talked to and been to all of these companies and talked to the technicians who are working in these companies, and they spend a lot of time at home on the phone. These are usually problems that come up. Can you imagine a networking problem for Verizon? Well, it usually involves a very large-scale issue. So it's usually something that is affecting communications in an entire city or an entire state or an entire area of the country. These are big problems. And it usually involves a number of different people, because at that point, you have to pull in the physical team. Do we have a physical problem? Did somebody bring in equipment and break a cable, break a fiber? That can happen. We also need on the phone the folks in charge of the protocols, of the networking piece. We also need the router teams. We need the switch team. We need the routing protocol teams. Maybe you're doing dynamic routing. So there's all these people. Whenever there's a problem like this, suddenly there's a phone bridge that's set up, and there's 10 people on the bridge that are technical, high-level folks that are working on this problem. They are the technicians. Whenever you're looking for the person who can fix this problem, that's who's on this phone call. And usually these are problems that can take hours to resolve, not only because of the scope of the issue, but the complexity of the issue and the number of people that are involved. And on top of the 10 people that know what to do, there's usually 10 more people on the call who have a job that their job is to make sure that those 10 people on the phone are doing their job, because these are big companies, and you can't have a big company without having lots of managers. And usually that's how it works, is that you have people that are now on the phone, and most of the time you're sitting there just listening. Okay, let's let the physical folks talk. All right, we checked the physical connection between the site A and site B. And we ran a BERT test, and we did this type of test. We ran the fiber connectivity, and we did this. And it takes them 30 minutes to talk about what they did. And finally they get in, and we found no faults. Okay, let's move over to the routing team. And now they do their thing for 30 minutes. Well, with 10 people on the call, this could be an hour as everybody goes through what they've done and where we happen to be. But unless you know what has happened and the troubleshooting steps that have occurred, you don't even know what direction to go. So you have to do that information gathering. All those types of jobs where someone is doing that very detailed, high-level communication and really working at a detailed level to solve the problem, they're probably working from home. And those are people make sense to work from home. If you're in an office, you'd simply be sitting at your desk on the same call doing the same thing. So it doesn't make sense. Why not stay at home and do that same thing? It's more comfortable. You're already getting paid quite a bit if you're at that level, and you're already responsible. You've already proven yourself in the industry. So it's a good example of where you can really focus on working from home is just one of the niceties that comes with that particular position. There's not a lot of jobs like this, by the way. If you work for a retailer, if you work for a transportation company, if you work for a manufacturing organization, most of those teams are going to be in the office because the entire organization sort of runs from that facility or from a series of facilities. And sometimes it helps to have other people there that you can communicate with. So work from home may not be, at least from a 24/7 perspective, not be the best choice for that particular job. So it depends on what the job is, and it depends on what it is that your organization does. And in some cases, it has to do with corporate culture as well. What we've seen, though, is we came back from the COVID lockdowns, and we were starting to slowly get back into an actual physical location, and people were being pulled away from the work at home that they were now comfortable with, and now they're being pulled to go back into the office. Sometimes for very good reasons, sometimes not, but that's not for me to say. That's really for the people working in that organization to make those decisions. And that's what I think you would get for Network Plus. It would start you on that path towards having a position that might be a remote position. Now, there's also other jobs where you're not working in an office. I've had one for a very long period of time that was a systems engineering position where I would get up in the morning and fly to a city, and maybe Monday morning I fly to a city and I have 3 calls, I have 3 meetings in that city. I go visit different customers, talk to them about things they were trying to do with their firewalls, talk to them about things they want to do to upgrade their firewalls, talk to them about problems they want to solve with their firewalls. And we would have a meeting in their office. We might have a lunch meeting. We might have a meeting in another office. And then the day is over. We sort of spend our day in those meetings, but you're in a car moving from place to place. You're taking the train. You're moving from one building to another. And then at the end of the day, you check into the hotel and you wake up the next day and you do the same thing again with 3 different companies that have 3 different things they're trying to do. So that's one where you're technically not working in a office. In fact, you're not really working from home either. You really are working in somebody else's office. Your rental car effectively becomes your office. Not an unusual thing, quite honestly. And so it really depends on what you want to do. There are jobs out there that are work from home or remote positions, but there's fewer of them these days because of the economic environments that we happen to find ourselves in. That will work its way out as time goes on. We'll get back to maybe something that's not as chaotic economically. Then things will start to go back to normal from that perspective. But having an expertise in networking, especially with a very large company and like in a provider, a service provider, such as the big ones that are out there, well, there's lots of work from home jobs there. It makes perfect sense. And in their environment, I wonder if, I didn't ask them, but it might make sense. Some of them might have to come into the office on certain occasions, but most of the time they're just working from home and they are just sitting on the phone waiting for their turn so they could say, we did this, we did this, we did this. We don't think it's any of their problems, but you still have to be there. You're still responsible for making sure that particular problem is solved, even if the responsibility for solving it isn't necessarily yours. And usually that's the situations we find ourselves in with work from home. So yeah, there's some jobs out there that Network Plus can help with, but it's more than just Network Plus. It is kind of a mixture of different requirements. You need a lot of expertise, for example. You need certainly a knowledge in security. The networking piece is important, and the ability to communicate well. I think that's a pretty important one. If you're working from home, practically everything you're doing is over a Zoom with a camera, or it's simply sitting on a conference call and listening to people that are going through this. So how do you keep a rapport and a professional communication going between people? Well, you have to be well-versed in how to do that. So that's why you often see in these certification exams where they talk to you about how to be professional, how to communicate. That's two big sections of the A+ exam, for example, and that's why they ask, because you may find yourself in that position and having to communicate and be professional. It seems like it should be easy. It's not. And there have been many calls I've been on as the technician trying to solve the problem where it took longer than needed to take because someone did not communicate well and was not professional. You run into these things. So it makes sense that we would need to ask you how, or teach you how to be more professional, teach you how to communicate better. Makes perfect sense. Let's do some more questions. I've got more that are coming in. Thank you for putting these in. And things that are available in here and to be able to work through. This is one more about career and direction. And it's from Edwin, who asks, I currently work in a help desk. I was told to skip A+ and go for Network Plus. What do you think? I think that if someone in your company that is higher level than you says that you should skip A+ and go to Network Plus, I would recommend you skip A+ and go to Network Plus. There's a saying that we often will talk about, especially people that I've used to work with and work for, is that we would always talk about, what is your job description? My job description is to make my boss happy. That's it. That's your job description. I know job descriptions have a lot more in there, and they talk about your day-to-day and, of course, other things assigned and blah, blah, blah. Job descriptions are sort of boring from that perspective. But if you were to summarize everybody's job description into one single statement, it is make your boss happy. Why is that a job description? How does that fit into this? It fits into this because there may be times where, in fact, in most environments, where every year, every 6 months, you meet with your manager and your manager evaluates how you're doing, and they give you an increase in pay based on how you've been doing over this last 12 months. And it's usually based on, I worked with one organization where they listed out, and when the year started, we want you to do all of these things. They had a list 5 or 6 things. So we want you to do all of these 6 things this year. Some of them maybe earn the certification, learn this particular task, go make this much of your quota. They just went through this list. Then at the end of the year, they go, remember that list we had? Let's go through it. Did you do that? Did you do this? You did all 6 of these. You get the highest pay increase. Here you go. So that's very common. Now, what if I'd done things outside of that list? Okay, well, that's interesting, but that doesn't matter, because your boss is happy when you did those 6 things. And so I tell people all the time that what you think might be the best course of action might actually be the best course of action, but that doesn't matter. Once you have your own company or you've moved up into your boss's position, if that's what you want to do, then you can make that happen. You can make those decisions. But those decisions are being made above you and being asked of you. They are paying you to do the things they would like you to do. The efficiency or what you think is the better choice is effectively not as important as actually the choice the boss made. And if you can make your boss happy, everything else is happy. That's sort of the end game that we're hoping to find, is make your boss happy. I realize that's a very generic term, and we're not saying that you show up every day with a shined apple and you put it on the desk and, hi boss, how you doing? That's not what we're talking about. We're saying that there's a certain set of expectations. You want to meet those expectations that they set, because there may be good reasons that they're asking for that particular thing, and there may be good reasons they aren't asking for other things. But you don't know that because you don't have the scope that it requires. The goal is, and perhaps the most important thing, especially if you're already working at a help desk and they say, we don't need you to get the A+. In fact, what they probably meant by this is that we feel that your experience and the things that you have learned working on the help desk cover any requirements we may be concerned about regarding topics from the A+ exam. And from our perspective, you don't need an A+. We think that your particular role qualifies you for effectively an A+ level set of knowledge. What we need now is for you to extend your knowledge. We want you to think even further down the line, or we want you to gain more skills in certain areas. And we think getting your Network Plus would be a great way to extend the skills that you already have. And it might even position you for getting out of the help desk and moving into the networking team. And they may be already thinking that, like, oh, we think Edwin has a mind for networking. He seems to know about the networking side of things. We'd like to get him onto the networking team, but to prove he's really got the starting point for someone to be a network administrator, he needs to go get a networking certification. And we think Network Plus is a good fit for that. That's what they're saying. I think if I had to read between the lines, that's what I think that's what it would be. So yes, skip A+ and go to Network Plus. Now you may be thinking to yourself, but wait, there's this foundational A+. And in my particular phase of my career, there are people in the industry who would like it if I had an A+ certification. Yes, but you don't work for them right now. Now, if you were looking at this and thinking, oh, I do not want to work for this company anymore. I've had it. I want to find somewhere else to work. You might want to go get your A+ certification outside the scope of what you're doing at work, because other companies might be asking you for the A+. They don't know you. They've never worked with you. They don't know how much time you spend on the help desk. They don't understand your day-to-day knowledge. And so they need something else to give them that qualification. And A+ would be a good example of that qualification. So it really depends on who you're asking, what they're looking for you to do, and what you want to be able to do into the future. And I think if they say, you don't need A+ for us, we want you to have Network Plus, go get that one. Okay, that's what you should do. That makes perfect sense. So that's what I would recommend you do as well. Go get that Network Plus. Very often we sort of miss the point of what sometimes employers would like us to do, but that's a pretty good one to be able to choose. They're telling you straight through and telling you this is what you need to do to continue moving up the ranks in our organization. Well, perfect for me. That's what I'll do too. Let's move on to some additional questions. We'll keep going through this list. And there's a number of these that have come through. There's sort of duplicates of these, so I apologize if I haven't gotten to this question. The last question we did about, do I do the Network Plus or do I do the A+? A lot of these, there's some duplicates in here. So I'm sort of deduplicating as we go through this list. So I apologize if I'm not specifically calling that out, but I think a number of you got your questions answered with that last one, for example. Let's keep going on the others and keep going through the list of these. And I think there's a lot on this list to go through. Some of these are outside the scope of the Network Plus, so I'm not going to initially focus on techniques and ideas about what we're doing here, but they're still good questions. We're just not going to cover them. Here's one. This is sort of more of an A+ question, but I think it's worth talking about because there's people will fight me on it. They go, oh yeah, well let's see if you got what it takes. This is from Chris, who says, have no viruses been discovered on Mac or Linux? The way people talk about Linux and Mac OS makes it seem like it's never had a security problem ever. In fact, that's not the case at all. There's some of the most involved and popular worms in computing history have been on Linux. As secure as Linux is, as secure as Mac OS is, and quite honestly, as secure as Windows is, people have still found vulnerabilities. They have found issues in certain applications. They have found ways to get into the operating system without having direct access to the operating system, without having a true authentication that you would need for that. And they've done that by finding vulnerabilities in the kernel, vulnerabilities with an application, and they've taken advantage of those vulnerabilities to gain access to the operating system. And yes, Linux has viruses, Mac OS has viruses, Windows has viruses. All operating systems, to some degree, have attackers that would like to gain access to those operating systems, and they'll find any vulnerability they can to be able to gain access to those. Now, what you find, though, and if you look at the list of viruses that are out there and what you can do with those viruses, the vast majority of viruses, we just talk viruses, not worms, not application vulnerabilities. If we just talk viruses, where you're clicking an application that is a malicious application that then infects a machine that you're on, the vast majority of those are in Windows. And why is that? If Mac OS and Linux also have these vulnerabilities, why aren't we seeing more viruses on Mac OS or Linux? That's because not as many people are using Mac OS or Linux as using Windows as a desktop operating system. And these days, the attackers want to get into the operating system that everyone is using. If you're going to spend your time as an attacker building malicious software, are you going to build it with a potential market of billions of people, or are you going to create software that would apply to thousands of devices? Well, you're going to write software that's going to give you the biggest return for your time. And currently, Windows has the majority of desktop-based operating systems that you could use. It obviously varies as time goes on. Certainly, Mac OS suddenly comes up a little bit. Linux gets a little popular. You have changes all the time, but the vast majority of desktop operating systems is Windows-based. And because of that, all the attackers write their code to Windows. They're trying to get a virus into the Windows operating system. And it's a fight. It's a battle. It's one where the attackers use one technique, and then Microsoft or other companies will update their operating system to block that technique. Then they go back and find a different technique, and it's a race. Now let's find a way to block that technique. Now let's do it. So we keep going back and forth, with the attackers finding new ways in, the operating system manufacturers finding ways to close that hole, and then we just keep going through that process. This is the reason, by the way, that phishing continues to work so well, because phishing is not one type of malicious software trying to take advantage of a known vulnerability. Phishing works on all operating systems. Phishing is an attack on the human operating system. So it has really nothing to do with Windows, has nothing to do with Linux, has nothing to do with Mac OS, has to do with how well someone can hack you. So that's an easy one. And that's why we see all of these scams that they're texting us with, that they're calling our grandparents and telling us that we are in prison and the grandparents need to get us out of prison by sending money in the form of an Amazon gift card. Because that's how most prisons work, is through Amazon gift cards. Now those are attacks, but they have nothing to do with an operating system. But there absolutely are viruses in Mac or Linux, just a lot fewer viruses available on Mac OS and Linux. And I think that's why people tend to think of those operating systems as virus-free, as not needing any type of virus control. But the reality is you still need to protect against malicious software. It's just that most of the malicious software is on the Windows side. For better or worse, that's the way it is. We can fight over it. I'll fight you. We'll go back and forth. But that's not doesn't change the fact that most viruses are on the Windows operating system. Other questions. Let's keep going there through this list. There's some pretty good ones here where people are asking more about study challenges and study strategies, and I think that may be worth really focusing on. This question from Emma asks, how would you plan your studies for the Network Plus exam if you want to pass it in 4 to 5 months? And quite honestly, that's probably over the average. I would say the average for people taking Network Plus is more around 2 to 3 months. Now, I am not average. It takes me a lot longer to pass an industry certification exam for a number of different reasons. My schedule now has limited time available to study. I also like to really understand a topic. I like to rip it apart and really see what's underneath and talk about it in different ways and find other people that can describe it. I usually study from 2 different books and video series. I like to get as many different types of input as possible. And then from there, I go to the next topic. But if I wanted to plan my studies for 4 to 5 months, I think I would start with the exam objectives, right? So in fact, let's go back to those objectives because I think it's a good checklist to be able to work through here. So I'm going to go back to that very first page of the objectives. There they are. And you could see that the objectives themselves are pretty well laid out. Let's go to the very top of the objectives. Section 1.0 or Domain 1.0 Networking Fundamentals. Section 1.1 says compare and contrast the Open Systems Interconnection, OSI, model layers and encapsulation concepts. The layer 1 through layer 7, physical data link network, transport session, presentation application, data encapsulation and decapsulation within the OSI model context, including the Ethernet header and IP header, the TCP UDP headers, TCP flags, payload, and maximum transmission unit. It's a lot there. That's just the first section. So if I was studying, this is my PDF. So let's get a color. Let's say our color is blue. And let's start with our knowledge of the OSI model. And we start studying the OSI model. And we learn everything that we think we need to know about layer 1, the physical layer. So we would maybe highlight that one. This doesn't highlight very well in the CompTIA PDF, quite honestly. We'll keep going through the list. Now we'll do layer 2. Now we'll do layer 3, and we'll just keep going through the list and checking it off as we go through it. And I think if you can explain a topic to yourself or explain a topic to someone else in very common terms, I think you can check that one off your list. Same thing for these other topics. You can go through and understand what's an Ethernet header. What does that look like? What OSI model does that fit in? What about an IP header? What does that look like? And where does that fit in the OSI model? And you just keep going through the lists and understanding what these happen to be. This is your checklist. Now, the question people will have, and they'll often bring this up, is what if I get a question on my exam that is outside the scope of these objectives? And I say every time, you're not going to. CompTIA stays so close to these objectives that it's remarkably unusual to get a question that goes outside the scope. But sometimes they do sneak one in. I won't say it's impossible. In fact, most people, I'm going to scroll up a bit, will give you this paragraph as, I don't know, they think it's proof or they think it's some type of evidence that shows that they could ask you anything. And I guess in some ways it is evidence, but let's talk about this. This says, it's a please note right at the beginning. It says, the lists of examples provided in bulleted format are not exhaustive lists. Professor Messer lied to us. Other examples of technologies, processes, or tasks pertaining to each objective may also be included on the exam, although not listed or covered in this objectives document. So that's your delineator right there. And that's where everything sort of falls apart for the people that say, no, I got a study book and it covered these topics that were not in the exam objectives, and they must know what they're talking about because they wrote a book. They don't know what they're talking about because they didn't refer to the exam objectives. And I think this is more of a lawyer speak saying that they could ask you something that's not in this list. They could, and they absolutely could. But in practical terms, the reality, I know reality gets in the way a lot of times. Here's one of those times. The reality is that they don't. If they do ask you a question that goes outside the scope of this, it's usually one or two questions, and it's questions that aren't graded. They want to know, do you happen to know the answer to this one, even though you didn't study it? And they may be planning to add topics in a later set of exam objectives. Very common. What I find on the internet, though, I find a lot of people send me badly written exam questions all the time. They send me ancient, out-of-date exam questions that are taken from previous versions of the exam objectives. And they say, look, they're trying to teach me outside the scope of the objectives so that I'm more well-rounded in networking. No, they're just too lazy to write new questions. And the reality is you will not be asked about these on the exam because they're not in the current version of the exam objectives. There's a difference in something being difficult because they went outside the scope of a set of exam objectives and just being inaccurate. And I think some people mistake a set of study materials as being harder or more comprehensive when in reality it's not as accurate as it could be and doesn't apply to the current set of exams. I see this all the time. So my recommendation, I think it was Emma that asked this one on working through these particular challenges with studying and doing it in a certain amount of time, like 4 to 6 months. I say just go to the exam objectives and start covering these topics. Now, you might do it a different way. You might get a good book, and you'll find that most books in the industry, most books that you'll get from Amazon and other places for Network Plus will clearly say that they're written for the N10-008, but they don't follow this format from the exam objectives. And quite honestly, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Starting with the OSI model is not really the best way to get into networking. I would like to see some introductory information before this. In fact, I have a video that's in my course called Introduction to IP, because in the second part, I think it's in the 2.0. Let's keep scrolling through here. Network implementations. Compare and contrast various devices, their features, and their appropriate placement on the networking. And we jump into this with layer 2 switches and layer 3 switches and routers and hubs and access points. And even back in section 1, we're going through port numbers and TCP and UDP. We haven't even talked about networking yet. How does any of this work? So there's a video that I have in my course called Introduction to IP, so that I can give you a primer on all of these things that you're about to learn. Without that primer, you're sort of jumping into this without any context, and I think context is important. That's the only time I want to say that's not really going outside the scope of the objectives. It's really extending the knowledge, but you have to do something before you jump into port numbers that explains why you even have these things. Otherwise, it's just a memorization, and that doesn't give you any scope, doesn't help you really learn what's going on. So I think that most books do a very good job of this by focusing on, well, now there's 2 of me. That's nice. Let's do something a little bit different with that. I think that most books try to get through this by giving you more context, but most of them stick very closely to the exam objectives. And what you'll find is that even in the books that don't follow that same format, they tell you what section from the exam objectives this chapter comes from. So you can sort of reverse cross-tabulate to the set of objectives and the videos that apply to that particular objective. So hopefully that gives you some perspective. As to study time, it's going to take you however long it takes to get through this much content. So maybe you take, if you want it done in 4 to 6 months, you figure out how much of these you can get through in a week. You split it into, 4, 8, 12, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, 24 weeks. You figure out how many weeks of time you have, and you figure out how much you can get through in that particular time frame. And so that you can at least give yourself some barometer of how quickly you're moving through it. And then at the end of 6 weeks, you've now finished all the exam objectives. You can walk in and take your exam. That's your goal. And I think that's a pretty good way to go through the process. Now, your way of learning these might be different than other people. Maybe having a checklist doesn't fit your style. Maybe you don't learn well when there's that much rigid time frames that I have to get through this many objectives in a week. Maybe you don't work that way. Maybe you like something more free-flowing, something that gives you a little more flexibility. So plan the objectives that way for you. You should be able to look at my videos and see how much time is required and be able to put your own plan together for the time frame. And if you do that, I think you'll be fine. Be a good way to do it. Let's have a look at, we got some time for more questions. So let's get some more in here. This one, since we took one from Emma, we're going to take another one from Emma. We'll keep this party going. I see where you're going with this, Emma. This next question says, all right, so now that we have studied for this Network Plus exam, I want to take this to the next level, and I want to get a position that's going to pay me well. So what role is the most well-paid role in the networking field? There's probably a number of these. Networking pays pretty well. Networking does a pretty good job. And it's almost like everything else. The entry-level jobs pay less. The higher-level jobs pay more. And in networking, we'll try to keep our scope just to networking, but I will tell you, in your career, you will probably move to different areas of IT as you evolve through the ranks. So when I started in IT, I was a field service technician. I hopped in my car in the morning and would deliver a cable and plug it in for a printer for a customer. Or I would deliver a printer as a replacement. Maybe they had one that broke, and I was the person that went out and swapped the printer out for their 1-year warranty, for example. Or maybe somebody wanted to upgrade the memory in a system, and I was dispatched with the memory, take it to the spot. I would take apart the computer on site, put the memory in, put the computer back together, and in an hour, this person was back up and running with more memory in their system. So that field service technician job, I was expected to do a lot of different things, but it didn't pay great. Paid very little. Quite honestly, it was probably the lowest paying position in IT that I had. It was by far. But that's one where you learn from that. And so my next move up was to a corporate help desk. I moved up to a help desk. That's how low that field service technician was. But I learned so much in that field service role that I could bring that to an organization that had similar requirements. We need someone who understands the hardware. They can upgrade the operating system. They can install the equipment we're looking for. They've already got the knowledge, and they've already gone through the process of learning this in the field, which, by the way, is a tough place to learn. Because if you show up on site and you don't have the tools you need, you don't have the hardware you need, you don't have what you need to make this problem fixed, then you have to go back and then return either later that day or another day with the equipment that you need to fix this problem. It's sort of that person who does DIY from home. You're doing it yourself, and you go to the hardware store and you come home and you're like, oh, I forgot to get that valve. Now I got to go back to the hardware store. So I always mention the 3 hardware store rule, 3 hardware store visit rule. So whenever I'm working on something, okay, I'll go the first time, but I know there's 2 more trips coming because I know I'm going to forget something. It happens all the time. So that kind of is the next level up, is sort of that corporate help desk or network operations center, or something where you're a triage. You're taking phone calls, you're going through messages, you're taking emails, you're going through tickets and figuring out who gets these tickets to solve these problems. Then you can start moving up from there. Maybe someone who's doing switch administration or router administration, where you're more of a break fix role, maybe a little bit of configuration, but someone else determines the plan. Someone else has already created the structure of the network. They've already designed the IP scheme. They've already made the decisions about what type of dynamic routing protocols they want to use. And really, it's just your job to implement it. So that's the role of someone in router administration and switch administration. Eventually, you probably want to be in a role where you're the one doing the planning. Another bump in pay. Now you're someone who has a larger scale. You understand these dynamic routing protocols. You understand the advantages and disadvantages of using BGP versus a static route. You also are implementing wide area network connectivity. And you know that, oh, we'll do SD-WAN here, but we need more of a point-to-point satellite-based connection for this site. Maybe it's worldwide. Maybe you have different data centers you have to connect together with different type of technologies, and they need to be higher speed. Maybe you've got a lot of connectivity. Maybe you have a disaster recovery site that's a hot site. Now we need a big network pipe going to that connection. So you're the one that has to decide, what type of connectivity do we need? How much speed do we need? what type of technologies are available to implement, how do we put the protocols on the network so that this is going to work as efficiently as possible, and if there's an outage, how do we switch over to that connection? That's more of a planning role, and you can only do that if you've moved up through the ranks. So now the planning role makes a little bit more money. As with any other job, an organization that has more money will be able to pay you more. Makes sense, doesn't it? It should. And that's basically how it works in the industry. So look around from a networking perspective, who has the most money in networking? And you will almost always go back to the companies that make the networking technologies. They're the ones getting paid. Every company out there that has Cisco routers and switches had to give money to Cisco. So guess who's got all the money? Cisco. Well, a good chunk of it. They've got a lot of money. So if you went to work for Cisco, you probably have a nicer desk, a nicer chair to sit in. You've got probably nicer benefits, and they have more money to pay you better. So very often, sort of the pinnacle of these jobs in technology, of a higher paying job in technology, tends to be with the manufacturer themselves. This could be a manufacturer of hardware or software. A lot of what I did in my industry, or in my career in the industry, was to work for those manufacturers. So 20, 25 years of my career was working for Network General, Network Associates, McAfee Associates, Palo Alto Networks. They had the money because they were being paid to provide firewalls, to provide antivirus, to provide intrusion prevention, to provide network management tools. But that also means you have to know everything there is to know about those products. This is why you get paid more. This is why there are fewer people working in those systems engineering roles, because there's not everybody in the industry has the ability to be that person who knows everything there is to know about that product and really spend the time doing it. It takes years to accumulate that knowledge and be able to work with customers in a way to get that knowledge out of your brain and getting it into the brain of the customer. And there's ways to do this that are efficient, ways to do this that are not efficient. So you're not just learning about technology at that point. You're learning how to be a communicator. You're learning how to solve problems. You're given issues that a company might have. So I've walked into these very large corporate companies, these Fortune 10 companies, Fortune 100, Fortune 1000, and they're saying, we produce this beverage and we have distribution centers all over the world, and we're having this problem with security between these different locations. How can we solve that problem? Well, here's one way you could do it. And we present a solution. You know, or maybe we have to go away and think about it. Maybe we can whiteboard it in that meeting, and we can talk about here's one way to do it and the advantages and disadvantages of doing it that way. Here's another way to do it and a different set of advantages and disadvantages. And here's a third way to do it where it's mostly disadvantages. Which would you want to go with? And then they can decide, well, let's see if this would work. How much would that cost? Okay, put together a presentation, put together some written documentation, another set of skills you would need to know. And then you go present that plan in front of usually someone who's making decisions about the money. So you'd have to know how to present in front of a room, another set of skills you need to know. And then they can decide whether they want to buy this or not. Then you sort of hand it off to the sales team. You've done your technical job. Now their job is to go close it, and then they make all the money. They make more money than you. That's usually how it works. They also have more risk than you do. Usually a systems engineer who's working at that level has a base salary that's somewhere around 80% of what you make is your base. And then 20% of what you would make on top of that is usually your bonus. Did you meet your quota for the quarter? If you made 100% of your quota, that's the 20%. If you make more than 100% of your quota, there are bonuses on top of that. Sometimes there's multipliers. Sometimes you can double your salary in a year just by exceeding your quotas. So there's money to be made in those environments, but it also requires someone to have a lot more skills themselves that go beyond certification, that go beyond just a rote technical knowledge of the technologies. It really is more about blending together all of those different skills into one set that will produce the best possible outcome for you and for the company you're working for. It just depends. Usually the higher level certifications that you get in a job means that you will be paid more in a job. It doesn't necessarily mean that, but anyone who works in, for instance, in the Cisco world will tell you that if you have a CCIE, you will make more than if you just have a Network Plus. I realize those are an ocean of difference between them, but I did that for a reason so that you would really understand you have to work into a CCIE. You can't just start in the industry and go, I'm going to work on my CCIE today. Yeah, but you don't have any certifications. Doesn't matter. That's where everybody says the money is. That's where I'm going to start. Yes, but you need to work into that. You can't just start at the top. Well, why start at CCIE? Why don't you just go be the CEO? There's a reason you can't. You have to work up to that level. So that's why I tell folks that are trying to find the best paid jobs in networking could be a number of different kinds of jobs, but usually it's about your knowledge and skills around that knowledge that will be able to determine how much money you can really make in this industry. And as I mentioned, it probably is more than just networking. Usually, I'll give you an example of how I worked in this industry. I started in that job with field service, which is really more of a hardware job, sort of a break fix upgrade for hardware. I moved into a corporate help desk, which was more of a combination of desktop operating systems and mainframes and network connectivity. It was sort of a conglomeration of all of those together. And then I moved more into a server administration role. I got the networking side down and the desktop side down. Now let's manage the servers. That's a different set of responsibilities. Certainly anything you do on a server can affect tens, hundreds, or even thousands of people. So there's much more responsibility set up if you're a server admin. From there, I learned a lot about networking and rolled that into a position working for a managed service provider. Really, it was more of a VAR, value-added reseller for networking products, and then moved into working for a manufacturer. At that point, Network General. Network General was the first company I worked for that was a manufacturer of a product. They were the company that made the sniffer product. So I learned network protocols, how to read and work on the network, how to view the network from a protocol level. It was sort of a view of the matrix before the matrix was out. You were watching all these packets go by and you were able to discern what was really going on in the network based on what you saw going across the screen, or being able to stop and rewind it and have a look slowly at what was really going on between application communication between two devices. And that, I think I stayed there for, I think I left and boomeranged back, but it was like 10 years with that company in different roles, but mostly systems engineer and senior SE. And then moved from there. And here's where the difference is that once you get a very strong knowledge of networking, you're going to almost certainly use that to understand how to secure a network. Because I think a lot of the money that's in IT right now is in cloud and security. There's certainly quite a bit in networking. There's certainly quite a bit in every place. In fact, if you just go work for a manufacturer, you're already doing pretty well. But whether it's databases or cloud or networks or security or anything else in IT, the higher you go up, and security tends to be more knowledge above the scope of networking, you make more money. It's probably more well paid than the networking side. But you can't move into security until you have this foundational knowledge in operating systems and networking. So like anything else, you sort of have to move around, sort of learn the lay of the land, gather this knowledge you have in operating systems and networks and servers and cloud, and apply that towards jobs that even move you up higher into the ranks. So hopefully it's giving you some scope. There's not just one job that is the best paid in networking. It's more of a series of different jobs that move you into positions. And in fact, what you may find is at a certain level of your career, maybe the amount of money you make is not as important as the flexibility you have at your job. I worked with someone in it was a private healthcare organization, and he was sharp. He knew everything there was to know about the technologies we were implementing. He caught on to them extremely fast. And it was a level of knowledge you don't often see. I think this was more of a sort of a public organization. So it was one where they didn't pay a lot. They didn't pay what everybody else paid. And I said, wow, you really know this stuff. Why aren't you taking knowledge you have and making more money over at that company or doing something like this? And he said, because I have a situation at home where I need more flexibility with my time. And this company says, we'll give you tons of flexibility. You can have a job here as long as you want it and do what you do for us. And then you have this flexibility you can use at home when scheduling things for you and your family. He's like, that's what I want right there. So he used his knowledge to give him the benefits and the bonuses and the flexibility that he could use, which is something you can't do if you're on the help desk, you're just starting out in field service, you don't have that level of knowledge. But because he was so sharp and so bright, the organization said, well, we want you working with us. What do we have to do to keep you here? Oh, well, you need this level of flexibility with your schedule? Not a problem. And they did that. So sometimes it's not just about money. Sorry, I had to laugh a little bit. No, really. Sometimes it's not just about money. And his example was a pretty good one. I don't know. I'm very coin operated. I sort of base things on how much money can I make doing that? And we go off and do those. A lot of systems engineers are. But not everybody is as shallow and has a lack of clarity that I have. They are much more tuned in to the important things in life. And they tell me straight up, it's not about the money for me. It's about having this level of flexibility. And they're absolutely right. That is, you should find the one that works for you. All right. I know we're at the top of the hour, but I want to do at least one more. This is kind of a bad question to ask me. But I'll talk to it anyway. I think most people, Toast Jeff says, do you recommend Palo Alto certifications after obtaining the trifecta for CompTIA and cybersecurity roles? As I just mentioned, I guess I could show it to you on the screen. There we go. As I just mentioned, I was a systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks. I was one of the very first SEs that they hired. I was employee number 95 with Palo Alto Networks back before they were public, back when they were just starting out. They were working out of a floor of a building somewhere in the Menlo Park area, or I forget exactly. I want to say it was Menlo Park. It might have been, it was not in Palo Alto. It might have been more in San Jose, Milpitas. I'm not really sure. Can't remember where we were at that time. That's how long ago it was. In fact, from the time that I interviewed in that very small office building that had one conference room, in that time that they hired me, they'd already moved to a larger facility. That's how fast things were moving with this company. Palo Alto is a company that came out of, I want to say came out of nowhere. In the world of technology, they kind of came out of nowhere. But imagine getting a bunch of people together to build a product that were already well established in IT as product managers, CEOs, CFOs, CTOs. They had the foundation of what they wanted to do, and they went out and did it. And it actually worked, which was even crazier. They built an entirely new form of security from nothing. The world had never seen anything like it before. And I was fortunate enough to luck into a position where they hired me to be one of their systems engineers. And I say this, not even kidding. I mean, I don't think even today, I should probably find the guy who hired me and ask him straight up. I don't think they wanted to hire me, but they had already hired a salesperson for this particular territory. And it's someone I'd worked with before. And he was my biggest proponent. He was the cheerleader who said, no, don't worry about these other people you interviewed. You need to get James in here. He needs to be my SC, and we will crush it. And he wasn't wrong, but how do you convince somebody of that? So that was the thing, that I believed I had the knowledge we needed. I knew I could take this technology and show it to people and help explain how it's new and it really does work. But it's one of those situations where someone hiring you doesn't know that. So they took a leap of faith and they hired me, and I stayed on there for 7 or 8 years. At Palo Alto, I went from this company where our corporate sales meeting was on the patio out at a macaroni grill. I don't even remember exactly where we were, but it was something like that. I mean, it was just, 15 of us at the time. That was the entire sales team for the entire company. And then when I left, of course, our annual meetings for sales teams were 1,000 people in the room, and the company was public, and all of those things happen. It was really something you very rarely get to experience working before you go public, and then suddenly going public and seeing all of the success that happens. And that was sort of the path I took. So I'm a little jaded when it comes to Palo Alto Networks. They continue to have the best technology in the industry. Everybody else is trying to copy them using older technology with just a bunch of paint and spackle on the top of it. But Palo Alto really is the real deal. They really have stuff that does very different than what anybody else in the industry even approaches, because they have the patents. And that's the real difference. Everybody else is a port-based product trying to act like a next-generation firewall, whereas Palo Alto Networks is a true next-generation firewall with efficiencies and capabilities that nobody else can even come close to reproducing. All they can do is kind of create a new front end and hope you don't realize that behind the scenes, they're really just a port-based firewall. I'm looking at you, Fortinet. And really everybody else. Even Cisco didn't know what to do at that point. I think Palo Alto Networks also came around at a good time, that at the time, and many of folks don't even realize it, right about that time frame when Palo Alto Networks was kind of approaching and going to market with their product, Cisco came out. The CEO of Cisco said, guess what, everybody? We're going to focus on these 4 areas, or maybe it was 5 areas of our company. Switching, routing, this, that, the other. And they said security was not in there. This was just before security blew up in the industry and really became an amazing area of IT and technology in general. So Cisco made a very significant strategic error and did not consider security as being a primary role in their organization. Quite honestly, they were in a difficult time. They were having problems with growth. They saw that security, they had their firewalls at the time, and their PIX firewall, and they didn't see that market growing. And so they sort of ignored it and said, we're not going to focus on that. Well, that's an open door. And for someone like Palo Alto Networks that up to that point had been working for years behind the scenes and nobody knew what they were doing. Nobody even knew they were there doing it. And suddenly came out of the gate with these amazing technologies that did an enormous technological leapfrog over everyone else, including especially Cisco. I threw out tons of Cisco firewalls when people saw Palo Alto Networks, because it was like comparing a Fisher-Price duck with wheels on it to a Porsche. And that's 2 different kinds of animals. Of course you're going to get the Porsche. That's the way it works. And so that's why I tell people that if you want a good set of certifications in technologies that people are going to ask for, you get the big companies. And maybe it makes sense for you to get a Fortinet certification, a Checkpoint certification, and a Palo Alto Network certification. There's nothing wrong with that. I think when you get into those niche certifications or manufacturer-only certifications, it might make sense to get them from multiple manufacturers. I'm not saying just focus on Palo Alto Network, but I am saying that a Palo Alto Networks certification is something that's certainly valuable in the industry. They're the real deal. So you're not just getting a cert from a company that tells you they do it, and it's actually a product that just keeps rebooting and doesn't do what you want it to do. That's somebody else's product. Palo Alto Networks has products that actually do what they say it does. So that's my approach. Completely biased approach, completely biased story, because I used to work there. So the disclaimer is sort of self-explanatory, isn't it? But I got behind the scenes. I got under the hood. I saw the comparisons between Palo Alto Networks and everyone else, and nothing else compared. So that's my approach. Is if you're working on Palo Alto Networks and that's a certification that's important to you, you can't do. It's not a bad decision, but you may also want to look at other organizations that have other certifications as well and add on to those, because not everybody has a Palo Alto Networks firewall. They might have Checkpoint. They might have Fortinet. They might have Cisco. Oh, what a firewall. Okay, so that's my approach. That's my very biased approach to the firewall world. I could talk for hours about the stories and things that we've seen and done, not just in building that company and watching it grow, but the things I got to see. Can you imagine taking a next generation firewall into a Fortune 500 company and plugging it in for an evaluation? This is a product that was able to show you things that nothing else could see. And the companies that would make these, that put these in, didn't realize what their users were doing because the users knew that IT couldn't see it. Now I come in with a product that sees everything and I put it on the network. The things we would see in the first 5 minutes, the level of inappropriate content that we would put on the screen in a 2-minute period after plugging it in would curl your toes. But you, as a representative of the company, I just kind of got used to this. I knew what we were going to see before we clicked the button. And it was actually a great selling tool. Like, oh, we can see on your network, this is what people are doing. Look at all the peer-to-peer. Look at all the people sharing files. Look at the inappropriate content that people have. Here's the URL they're going to. That seems to be suggestive. So it was just a horrible thing that you would see there. Not say horrible. It was very inappropriate for business, for a company. And so that's a good example of, it was no longer shocking to me, but some companies were in denial about what was really going on their networks. Therefore, next generation firewalls had a significant advantage over anything else out there. So there's lots of people that want to be like that. The WatchGuard wants to be like that. The Fortinets want to be like that, but they can't be. There's no way you can approach that level of knowledge and information because it's something that they've got the patents for. You can't do it. That's business anyway, but that's my approach, and that's my incredibly biased perspective on the world of firewalls and why certain jobs will pay you better than others and why some certifications may be better than others. But you need to find out, for the jobs you're applying for, what do they want you to have? And if all the jobs you're applying for say, we want you to have a checkpoint certification, don't go get Palo Alto Networks, go get Checkpoint. You know, you also have to temper the knowledge that you know might help you in the future with what might help you today. You can always go back and get the Palo Alto Networks cert once you've got the job. Just put it like that. And quite honestly, you probably get the job and they go, yeah, we know we had you go get Checkpoint because that's what we have now. We're throwing out all this stuff and we're putting in Palo Alto Networks anyway. Do you want to go to Palo Alto Networks cert? So sometimes these things work themselves out, and being able to work through the challenge with all these. Well, that definitely takes us a little bit of overtime, but I think that gives you a perspective as to some of the things that I think in that particular world. Maybe that can help you with your plans and what you're looking towards, at least from the perspective of getting a security-based certification. I want to thank all of you for being here today. As I mention every time we do one of these, I can't do these without you. It would be a very, very boring set of questions and answers if I was here alone doing this to an empty room. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the time you spent in the first hour answering questions. I'm glad you were able to join us live. If you're watching this in the replay, come join us live on one of our events. Check the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. If you like what you saw today, again, giving it a thumbs up would help us quite a bit. And if you subscribe to the channel, I'd just be over the moon. That'd be fantastic. I appreciate all of your ongoing support. Come back next week. We've got our Security Plus study group. Lots more going on this month. And when we're not here, we're over on Discord. You can join us there at professormesser.com/Discord. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group.